There we go. Can everybody see my screen, or could you? Yes, okay. Thank you, Victoria, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. It is an absolute joy today that I get to share with you my favorite place in the entire world. On top of mountains, otherwise known as summits. I started climbing 14ers, which are mountains over 14,000 feet in Colorado, with zero experience, and it nearly killed me. But that is an entire other speech and story. Because of that experience and what I learned from not being prepared, it has distilled in me an obsession with being prepared and to help educate others who may be interested in climbing 14ers. But don't worry, if you're not interested in climbing 14ers, everything I go over today can still be applied to hiking no matter where you are. My first 14er was Pikes Peak, and it was not a good journey. I was forced into this 14er. You never want to be forced to do something because it makes the experience that much more miserable. I was not in shape. My expectations were not aligned whatsoever to the challenge, and I didn't have the right clothes, footwear, equipment. It was basically the most miserable 10 hours of my life. I've never been in such a battle between my mind and my body, and it was just physically exhausting, both physically and mentally. But when I got to the top, it was an experience I had never experienced before. The sense of accomplishment that flooded over me was unreal, and I was hooked for life. It gave me confidence that I use later in life, years later even, and it's something that somebody could never take away from me. Even though that first hike was so miserable, I actually did do something right. For some reason, I took notes the entire time. I don't know if it was therapeutic, where I was writing down everything I wished I had, because at the same time, I was telling myself I'm never doing this again. But I'm so glad that past Rachel, something in her, decided to write down, I need thicker hiking boots, I need chapstick, I need tissues, I need a thicker hat. Because when I did decide to do my second mountain, I had a full list where it was basically moment by moment, everything I needed. And then on that second climb, same exact thing. I realized I needed different things than my first climb. And so almost a decade later, I have a very prepared backpack that is ready to go, and I feel very prepared. So as my number one tip to climbing 14ers, always bring something you can take notes, because you will forget. This list is not in order of importance, because if it was, safety would definitely be first. And most of the things on this list are about safety. But as tip number 2, it's the philosophy of safety first during your whole entire journey, putting every single decision through a filter of what is the safe thing to do. When you leave on your hike or climb, make sure that you put a note on your dashboard that says when you left, who you're with, your contact information, when you plan to be back at your car. If something were to happen, time is the most imperative thing that they can get to you fast. Rangers typically go by and look at the cars on the hour. So if they get to a car at 5 and see you're supposed to be back at 2, they can start searching for you right away. If there's no note, they might not realize something's wrong until the following morning, and you would have been in the elements for that long. So make sure to leave a note and definitely include emergency contact. Slow and steady is a philosophy that I think is so important when hiking, not only to really be aware of what's going on and being mindful, but for safety reasons. Slow and steady conserve your energy, because what goes up must come down. You always have to have enough energy at the top to get back down. And also constantly asking yourself, if I push on that last half of a mile and a thunderstorm comes in, can I run to tree cover in time? Do I have enough energy conserved? Because when you're above tree cover, you're the tallest thing for lightning, and weather can change on a dime. This is my brother hiking with me on one of my 14ers a couple years ago. He was going through a really horrible time, and I thought hiking would help his confidence. And I was actually surprised when he said yes, given he had never even hiked before. We got to the trailhead, and even though I had told him to go slow and steady and all of my tips, he took off fast, not going slow and steady and without a map. He got lost multiple times, but luckily it was a well-traveled trail, so he could find us and others, and eventually we reconnected and summited. We joke later that he really climbed 3 mountains because he was looking for everybody the whole time. That's why it's so important to bring, at minimum, a map and a compass. But my personal favorite is just paying the $60 for a subscription to All Trails, where you can not only download a map offline, but it even tracks where you are and alerts you if you get off the path, even on airplane mode. Layers. Everyone knows you're supposed to bring layers, especially in the Pacific Northwest. But when you're climbing 14ers, it takes it to a whole other level. The temperature at the trailhead could literally be 70 to 100 degrees difference at the top. I've been on trails where I start at 30, it goes to 90, and then it goes below 0 at the trailhead with the wind chill. And as you can tell from this picture, there's a lot of ridges and a lot of places you're exposed. The more layers, the better. Quick note about expectations. Just assume it's going to be the hardest hike of your life. Do not go in thinking it's going to be easy. That does not help anybody, and it will make it even more miserable. We all know to drink water when we hike, but make sure you're drinking it before and after as well. And we know we're supposed to drink it during, but sometimes when it's so cold, we forget because it's the last thing our body wants is to drink something cold. But make sure you're hydrating. Pedialyte is a huge treat that I discovered. I always have a Pedialyte before, and then I always have one waiting for me at the car. This one in particular was after climbing 3 mountains in one day. Helps replenish the electrolytes you lose when you sweat. The summit rule is really important. And basically the summit rule is the mental awareness and acceptance that you might need to turn around without reaching the summit. This is the #1 reason why people die on Mount Everest. They see it in the distance, they know the turnaround time, but they just go a little bit further. You have to be okay with turning around and trying again. And last, but maybe most importantly, make sure you take time to celebrate your massive accomplishments. We have 2 traditions with my hiking buddies. We always have a summit beer, and that beer is the best beer you will ever taste after a long journey up. And then we always have signs at the top to not only remember the date we did it and the name of the mountain and the elevation, but it's a nice bonding experience the night before. We always make each other dinner, we color our signs, and you can really see people's personalities in their signs as well. So there you have it, the top 10 to 14ers. I hope these best practices that I've learned through the years will help you in your hiking or if you decide to take on 14ers. But remember, the most important rules are always be prepared, always be safe, and always have fun. Victoria.
Thank you, Rachel. Madam Timer, can we please have 1 minute on the clock? If you would like to give Rachel feedback, you can use chat option and just speak Rachel's name in the chat drop down. And then Rachel, after you get some feedback, you can save the chat to your computer so you have the feedback on your computer.
Thank you.
That's a minute.
Thank you, Madam Timer. Before we move to our next speaker, I would like to mention a few other things about hiking tips. So let me share back my screen. So we talked a little bit about needing the pass, which is, again, very important, and they do check them. But the other is the 10 essentials. So there's various lists. And actually, when I Googled it, it turns out that the original 10 essential list, as we know it today, was created in 1930 here in Seattle by the group of outdoor enthusiasts. And the original list is kind of similar to what it is today. It didn't really change, but it was really simple. A map, a compass, sunglasses, extra clothing, headlamp, first aid supplies, fire starter matches, knife, and extra food. Now, as the time progressed and hiking became really today a hobby for so many people and many more people are participating in it, today this list looks like this. It is actually exactly what it used to be, except because we have so many more different devices and technologies available to us that it actually a little bit extended. Also, I would like to highlight the number 2 and number 4, because I personally ran into that issue myself. If you have a headlamp, make sure you have extra batteries, because if you end up hiking late at night, or perhaps you didn't check your headlamp before the hike, your battery might run out, and then of course it's not that useful anymore. Also, if you do have first aid, make sure you have the foot care and insect repellent. In case your boots gave up after so many hours of hiking, or you run into insects or some other bugs, that would be very helpful as well. Otherwise, of course, today there are many, many different things, but as every hiker knows, before you go on a hike, even if you have the top 10 list, it's very helpful to either, like Rachel mentioned in her speech, to have the backpack always ready, or lay it down on the floor the night before, especially if you consider a long hike, to really be sure that everything is working, everything is up to date. So for example, in the medical kit, the medicine is not expired and things like that, and make sure that everything is working properly. And now we're gonna move to our second prepared speech of the day. And our second speaker is Randy. And Randy is doing the project, which it's not really from a pass, so not from Toastmasters Pathways program, but he is preparing for the advanced Toastmasters training that he will be giving at the end of August. So this will be the preparation for that speech. At some point in our lives, we were all persons who knew nothing about Toastmasters. How would we explain to our past selves what to expect at a Toastmasters meeting? What are its purposes and its roles? The goal of Randy's speech today is to prepare you or someone else new to Toastmasters to enjoy and understand an upcoming Toastmasters meeting. And I also asked Randy what is his favorite hike. And Randy's favorite hike is a short hike, which is also beautiful walks through the forest of different trees down the trail to Lake Washington in St. Edward's State Park in Juanita, Washington State. And Randy mentioned that when he was in high school, he used to run on that trail. So enjoy the nature. And with that, help me welcome Randy with his speech, what to expect in a typical Toastmasters meeting.
Thank you, new Toastmasters. I have to ask you, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, right? I know you know that joke. I don't have to tell it again. Practice is the fundamental methodology of Toastmasters, providing a supportive environment in which we can develop our communications and speaking skills. And the place where we practice is the club meeting. Each club meeting is organized with up to 12 roles. And if you're new to Toastmasters, it may seem that this is awful picky. Why do you have so many million roles? Think of it not as a job. Each role is an opportunity to take the stage and speak, or else to practice some other leadership skill. So I would like to throw away the title role and just say opportunity to speak. We can get a handy list of roles at every meeting by looking at the agenda. This agenda was put together for this meeting by the Toastmaster. Now we see the Toastmaster, Victoria, today as basically the MC, the ringmaster, the person who points her little whip and the various seals clap or balances balls in their nose or speaks, right? Bark, bark, bark. But before she does that, notice how well she organized the meeting. So that if she were sleeping right now, she could just read off the agenda and we would all know what happens. Have you been at a meeting without an agenda where you all sat around and said, we got to get something done? Who goes first? It's very risky because sometimes you just waste an hour not really getting the point done. A great thing about the agenda that the Toastmaster puts together is we have start and stop times. If we deviate from our plan, because a plan is just a point of departure, we can get back on track because we've got things all lined out here. Toastmaster may seem like an awesome responsibility, and well, it is a responsibility, but it's an easy job because you get to carry a script with you and just read off the script if you so choose. I would encourage you, don't be shy. Take the job as Toastmaster as soon as you feel ready. But if you want to start off a little briefer, look at the first two jobs. The joke teller is just telling a joke. Google a joke or remember your favorite one from when you were very young. Get up on stage and let her rip. This is a supportive environment. We're all looking for a laugh. The next tip, the next role or opportunity is tip of the day. All of us have lived long enough so that we have wise sayings, good ideas, something we want to pass on to others. That's the tip of the day. Could be about speaking, could be about where to get a good pizza in West Seattle. You got to go to Proletariat White Center. The tip of the day is another brief speaking opportunity. Grab it if no one else has. Once the Toastmaster takes over the meeting, she or he introduces the evaluation team. An important part of the Toastmasters method is that after we perform, we have friendly and supportive evaluation of our performance so that we can get better at it. There are three basic members to the evaluation team. Number one is the timer. And this is a good role because it's very, well, you might say, mechanical. You just keep track of the length of time of the speech. As Karen explained, flash the green light at one point, the yellow and the red light at other points. And then at the end of the meeting, read off the time so that we can all know whether or not we made our target times. The second member of the evaluation team is the grammarian or counter. Now, other roles may tower above the meeting like a mighty sequoia. The grammarian is more like the understory, the ferns that are extremely important. They look small, but they break down the duff and to provide soil for the trees to grow in. Likewise, the grammarian listens to our speech very carefully for clever turns of phrase, words and phrases that really worked for us, or maybe did not. Also listens for that filler sounds we put in, when we're, just trying to fill space because we have a mind gap. It happens to all of us. And by keeping track of that, the counter grammarian helps us improve. Finally, the grammarian comes up with the word of the day, which is a challenge, a fun challenge. If I could remember the word of the day, I would use it right now. The third member of the team is the general evaluator. And the general evaluator's job sounds fancy, but it's really just going down a checklist. Did we start on time? Were all the roles filled? So on and so forth. And then at the end, just a general evaluation of how the meeting went. Because we're not just here to learn speaking, we're here to learn leadership. And making a meeting run well is a really important part of being a leader. The 12th role is the speech evaluator. While we give prepared speeches, a speech evaluator is listening to the speech. Similar to the grammarian, listening for clever turns of phrases, things that work, but also looking at the whole tone of the speech. Did the speech work? How did it affect me, the evaluator, as a listener? The evaluator has a challenging task to come up with a short 2 to 4 minute commentary on the speech, which is supportive and also useful. There's a variety of structures for doing that, but fundamentally you have to look at 2 parts of evaluation. It's like coaching. You have some technical points, like Randy did pretty good starting with a joke that really affected me. And then there's also the encouragement. Randy, this is better. So if the evaluator balances the technical advice with the encouragement, they can do a good job. And here's the thing, anybody can do that. You do not have to be a speech wizard to be an evaluator, because we have all listened to language for the 21 or more years of our life. So we're thoroughly competent to say, your speech really moved me, if that's what happened. I would encourage you to take on the opportunity of evaluator also, because it's a great way to improve your understanding of how speeches work. You're not just listening to yourself talk, you're listening to someone else and go, oh, that really worked. I wonder why it did. I urge you, if you really want to be good at speaking, take every opportunity to pick up an evaluation role. You will not regret it. There were 2 roles that I left to the end because they are my favorite. Everything I've spoken of so far centers around preparation, prepared speeches. But not all the talking we do is prepared. In fact, most of our speaking is kind of spontaneous, right? You're in a business meeting and the boss says, why is figure 64A inconsistent with form 24OB? And you got to come up with something. You will. If you practice spontaneous speaking, you will come up with it better. Toastmasters calls spontaneous speaking practice table topics, because the idea is the table topics master is sitting around a table like you're at Thanksgiving making conversation, or at a business meeting doing one of those business meeting exercises. And the table topics master comes up with a theme, comes up with an idea, something to talk about. And a person volunteers. I will talk about that. And without further preparation, the table topics speaker rips away from 1 to 2 minutes or some other amount of time. This is a wonderful game to play. I urge you, every time table topics comes up, be the first person to volunteer, because this is a supportive environment to practice your speaking. So why not grab for every opportunity there is? World champion of public speaking, Darren LaCroix, all the time says, take every opportunity to take the stage. Yes, seize the stage, because that's how you improve. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. You never know till you try. If you're not giving a prepared speech, the meeting has 12 other opportunities for you to seize the stage. I urge you, give it a try, and someday you'll make it to Carnegie Hall. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you so much, Randy. Madam Timer, can we have 1 minute and actually 2 minutes? We are voting for the best speaker as well. I don't know that we went through the voting procedure. But let's have 2 minutes. So if you would like to give feedback to Randy, you can use similarly with Rachel chat option, just pick Randy's name, and then Randy, after you receive feedback, you can download your chat by saving it to your computer. And then just think about it, who you would vote for as the best speaker. And I think we will vote at the end of the meeting.
That's 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Timer. So that concludes the prepared speeches of our meeting. Before we move to impromptu speaking portion of our meeting, or table topics as they're known, I would like to come back for a second to the 10 essentials, because I didn't share with you all of the 10 essentials. So I shared with you the 10 essentials that were originally created in 1930, the 10 essentials as we know them today, but I would like to add to the list what are also some of my recommendations. I also recommend to carry a bear spray. Hopefully you will never have to use it, but its shelf life is 3 years if you buy it. And in case you do have to use it, you might as well have it. Or at least it will make you feel more confident on hikes that are really out there in the wilderness. I recommend to bring water filter, because if you're doing a longer hike, there is never enough water that you can carry unless you really want to carry a lot of weight on you. But there is a lot of good water sources on a lot of hikes. You just need to have the water filter. I also like to have small pocket binoculars to spot the wildlife and also look closer at certain animals. I have seen a lot of wildlife in all of my 4 years of hiking, so highly recommend, because obviously it's not recommended to approach it. These days, we all carry our phone with you. So maybe in the 1930s, having an extra phone charger or extra phone battery was not necessary, but certainly recommended today, especially if you are using your phone also as your camera, or at least make sure you put it on a save mode or airplane mode so that again, you can have your battery last as long as possible. And finally, for the maps, it is recommended to have the printed map if you can have. And I really like the National Geographic maps because they actually outline all of the hikes that you can point to where you are and where you can continue on the trail, how trail connects. So check their website. You can order them online or buy on REI, but they're really great paper maps. And going back to number 1 about the bears, here are some of the pictures of the bears. I have seen quite a bit of bears here in Washington State. I have seen them around the Mount Baker and Mount Rainier. These are some of the pictures I take of them in the distance. It's usually really cute scene where the cubs are fighting with each other and the mom bear is just eating, not really paying attention to you. So it all ended well for me in as many times as I have seen bears, but there are bears out there. And obviously one time I'm happy to share my most dangerous bear story, which I will leave for next meeting. Without further ado, we will move on to our impromptu portion of our meeting. And I would like to introduce our table topics master, Rachel. Rachel.
Thank you, Victoria. For table topics tonight, it is theme-based around hiking, and they're just questions that I will ask. And if for some reason you don't hike, it's either an opportunity to make up a story. So for those of you who are new to table topics, it doesn't have to be true. So it's a great opportunity to just pretend to be the person you want to be, and no one will know. And if, again, you don't have, for instance, a most memorable hike, you can either make one up or just answer another question altogether, completely up to you. And to Randy's point, to raise your hand when you have stage time, I will now open it up for volunteers. No one wants to take Randy's advice. Kelly, all right. Pick a number between 1 and 10.
3.
3. What is your most memorable hike or camping experience?
Fellow Toastmasters, I will now tell you about my most memorable hike. So I hike with my children and my husband, but this particular hike that I'm remembering was before my daughter was born. It was when my son was 9 months old, and we were visiting Washington to go hiking around the state from Texas. So I have a 1-year-old who is maybe a little jet lagged and very particular about his naps. But my husband and I were very, very determined to do as many hikes as we possibly could. We drove our son out on a very long car ride to Deception Pass. And we decided to just go walking around. As we've heard several times tonight, it is very important to come prepared. As a parent, there are additional things that you need to bring along your hikes with you. One of those things are snacks. I neglected to pack snacks. So we had our 1-year-old son in the hiking backpack, and he was on my back at first. But when I want to say maybe 15 minutes away from the car, he just couldn't handle it anymore. He really needed a snack. So he expressed this, not with words, because we didn't have those yet, but through screaming and crying and grabbing my hair and pulling it. So we switched. I put my son on my husband's back, and he proceeded to do the same thing. This led me to not only hiking, but now turn it into a trail run. And I jogged down the trail the rest of the way to the parking lot to get to the car, to get the bag of the precious gummy snacks and run it all the way back to my son. That, fellow Toastmasters, is my most memorable hike.
Oh, wow. Great story. Where's the Snickers when you need it? Talk about getting hangry. All right. Franny, did I see your hand?
Sure.
All right. Pick a number between 1 and 10.
7.
This one's along the same lines of getting outside of your comfort zone. So not really associated with hiking per se, but when was the last time you tried something new?
Well, I won't tell you the last time I tried something new. I will tell you one of the most memorable times I tried something new, which I learned how to ski despite being afraid of heights. And okay, chairlift is going to be a problem there. And despite being terrified, I was going to ski off the edge of the world and die. And but here I am. I'm in Montana. I'm in some of the best snow country ever, and I could learn how to ski for 1 credit and about $20. So I thought, well, you're dumber than a box of rocks if you don't, take this. And I will say that probably the first 5 to 7 years I skied were the hardest, because every time I went out to the hill, I thought I was going to die. And I'd get partway down and I'd look out at the view, which were never as spectacular as in Rachel's slides, but I'm a city kid, they came a close second. The views and just the exhilaration of going fast. A real fear was I didn't learn how to stop until I skied for several sessions with the instructor. And finally, I had a friend of mine come out, and she skied. She was in school in Colorado, and she wanted to know, why did I have this look of terror on my face the whole time I was skiing? I said, because I don't know how to stop. So I introduced her to my instructor, who was one of the guys I worked with at the sandwich shop. And she said, what's wrong with you? Teach her how to stop. And the very next lesson we had, which was probably my 3rd or 4th ski lesson, he taught the entire class how to stop. But for years, pretty much any time I went out on the ski hill, that was outside my comfort zone. But that was also, 35 years ago. I'm still skiing. I still love it. It's not so much of a challenge, but every time the snow is different, I'm outside my comfort zone. Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you for sharing. Anytime that you do something where you think you might die, I think it's always a great experience. So kudos to you. All right, Amy, pick a number between 1 and 10. Oh, you're on mute.
I can't remember which numbers were already taken. How about 8?
All right. If you could go on a 10-hour hike with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
That is a great question, but I am going to answer a different question. I'm going to combine the first and second question and give you an answer to that. I was recently in Bosnia and went rafting, whitewater rafting for the first time. It was so much fun and it was amazingly gorgeous. It was this river just sort of meandered down between these giant cliffs. The understory was just lush and green and full of wildlife. I can't tell you how beautiful Bosnia is. It's something you have to see for yourself to really believe. And on this trip, we got on these rafts and we went down the river, and it got to a place where we stopped, got out of the rafts, and walked across the rocks. And when I say rocks, I'm talking boulders. There was a boulder with a 45-degree slant that we had to actually walk down. Me, graceful Gertie, I fell on my butt. I hurt myself. I had a hard time getting up and then continuing on. But we got up, went through the rocks to the top where there was a cave. In the cave was water, ice cold water, compared to the warm water outside, which we dove into, swam across, were hauled up on the other side by our guide, who led us across this long, very rocky, very bouldery trail to where the rafts were, so we could get back in and go. Well, it was amazing coming out of this cave, even though at one point I sat down and I slipped and I went backwards and almost fell on my head. You come out of this cave with drippy moss coming down the front. One of the most beautiful things I have ever seen. That was a first, and that was an adventure and very memorable. Adam Table Toastmaster.
Thank you for sharing. I had no idea about the landscape or that they even had rafting in Bosnia, so I'll have to check that out. Timer, do we have any time for any more? Or Toastmaster?
Toastmaster, yeah.
Toastmaster.
Yeah, I think we can do one more.
One more. All right. Okay, Randy, go for it. Get your stage time.
I'll go for my stage time. Did someone pick 7?
They did, but I'll just give you another one.
Okay.
What is your favorite hiking food before, during, and after?
The hiking food that I remember with greatest joy was something that we did back in New England when we did our annual hike around Mount Washington along the presidential ranges. The presidential ranges are these mountains. They're what, 3,000 or 4,000 feet high, ancient as anything. And during the Depression, the Civilian Conservation Corps built what they call huts. There's these stone buildings made out of stone, and they're super reinforced with the materials of the time because the weather there is awful during the winter. But during the summer, you can reserve space in each one of these huts. So Mount Washington, Mount Adams, Mount Eisenhower, which is bald, and then the last one, Mount Monroe, something like that. So we would start at one of them and go from hut to hut. It's perfect camping because you don't really have to carry food except for snacks. You need snacks to carry along the way. And when you get to the hut, they provide amazing food. I think it was like cabbage pierogies or something like that, hauled up to the hut by these fantastically healthy college students. This was their job. They took a big case of cabbages and put on a pack frame above their heads, so it was nicely balanced, and ran up the mountain to the hut. And then they ran down the mountain to get other stuff. And then after we, weary office worker hikers, had gone to sleep, they would run over to the other huts to party. I don't know how they survived, but that food that they prepared in the hut was wonderful. And I think I have to go back for the food alone. Thank you for the memory.
That was like before, during, and after. Food, I think, just tastes better when you're at altitude. I've actually climbed Mount Washington, and so I'm familiar. It's not a 14er, but it definitely is long. So that was a challenge as well. Thank you for coming on my table topics journey and answering questions about hiking and most memorable experiences and getting out of your comfort zone. I will turn it back over to Toastmaster Victoria.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you for coming up with great questions. And before we move on to the evaluation part of our meeting, please think about who you would like to vote and take a piece of paper, just take a note for the best table topic, and we will vote towards the end of the meeting. One quick more facts about hiking before we move to the general evaluation portion of our meeting. So my little cute bears, and how to find the hikes. So there's 3 resources that I found most helpful. If you're going to the national park, check the NPS. They have the app. Unfortunately, it's not available offline. It only works if you have Wi-Fi. But if you prepare in advance, they do have a great website. And why I like it in particular, they have the warnings about which roads are closed, which trails are damaged. And it's really coming from the rangers in the park, so you can get updated to the most recent happenings in the national park. Washington Trail Association is another great resource. It's not useful for maybe maps, but it's great to like get the description and ratings of the trails. But it's also very helpful to get some additional resources. Maybe if you're taking children on a hike, or you're looking to take your pets on a hike, or you're going with a big group. So it has kind of structured that way. And then of course, all trails that I believe Rachel mentioned as well in her speech. If you buy a paid subscription to this app, you can map available, download any hike map. It works all over the country, so not just in Seattle and Washington State here. And it's really great because you can download the app, you can save it offline. It will always show you if you're off trail. You can also rank your hikes. You can, share your pictures. You can see other people's pictures. It's very, very useful resource. And the other resource is there's a gentleman by the name Craig Romano. You might have seen his books in the bookstores or some even souvenir shops. And I actually really enjoy his books because they are little collections and they are covered by the region in Washington State. So you can take North Cascades, Central, Olympic Peninsula. And what I really enjoy, he ranks all hikes by the difficulty and also how scenic they are, what you're going to see on the way. So for example, it's mountain views or rivers or lake or wildflowers. And he gives the descriptions of how to proceed on the hike. They're also very accurate, but if you do buy one, make sure that you buy the most updated edition because they are updated, I think, every few years. And he also has a webpage if you would like to check that out. I really enjoy his books, and I think I have used his advice several times. So those are for the resources. And now we're going to move to the evaluation part of our meeting, and that part is being led by Amy, our general evaluator tonight. Amy?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. This has been a great meeting, hasn't it? Such a fabulous topic. Before I get started with my evaluations, let's see, hang on just a moment. Before I do my evaluation, I'm going to have the evaluators do theirs. The first person to do an evaluation is Franni Turean, and she is going to be evaluating Rachel's speech. So Franni, take it away.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, everybody, and especially thank you, Rachel. Rachel is doing a project where it's evaluation and feedback, which is, you can see this on page 2 of or the back page of your agenda today. I asked Rachel if there were some specific things she wanted me to look at, and she gave me 3. I love 3s. So number 1, she wanted to get more comfortable with PowerPoint and Zoom. You aced it. Wanting to work within your time frame, I have a comment about that. And presenting clearly without a lot of pre-planning. Well, I think you cheated on this one because this is a topic you can do in your sleep. So you've basically been pre-planning for a long time, but I thought your presentation was incredibly smooth. The evaluation form asks for what did you excel at, what you might want to work on, and what you can challenge yourself with. So I'm focusing on those. You excelled at your introduction. You told us what was your significant hike and that what were some lessons you learned along the way. What I loved about your lessons is that these are also actually life lessons. They're not just pertaining to hiking. I loved your choice of slides and the very, I call it judicial, but the very limited use of words. I love, my favorite slide, besides all these beautiful pictures, was the one of the note on the dashboard, because it was so perfect. You didn't have to say you need to have emergency, it showed us everything in that one slide. You also did very good planning. Planning would be the understory of your entire journey that you gave us, because without that, we wouldn't have the richness of your presentation. What you might want to work on in future speeches is you were just and I'm being incredibly picky here. You had a hiccup in your transition from, okay, are we there yet? Are my slides there? Can you see them? Just practice again and again and again. So that's really smooth. That was just a little tiny bit distracting. Another suggestion, your second slide was safety first, but you backpedaled and said, well, this really should be first. So if you want that to be first, put that one first. You also had a slide about dress in layers, and the visual was this fabulous visual of people way up high on a ridge, and it looked like it was really cold. I think what would be helpful is if you showed us somebody who had a whole bunch of layers on, and that adds a little bit of humor, but it also shows various ways to dress in layers. To challenge yourself, I don't know where you were in timing other than just like me, you hit the red. When you're doing a contest speech, the advice is always to time for 6 minutes. So if you're doing a speech that's 6 to 7 minutes, may I suggest 5 to 7, I suggest you time yourself to come out at 6 minutes. That gives time to flub, it gives time to laugh, it gives time to unexpectedly pause, and you'll be within your time. I loved your life lessons. You have inspired me to perhaps do more hiking. Thank you.
Amy, I think you're on mute.
My apologies. My internet just died. It froze and I lost you guys. I am back now. Just one moment, please. Okay. I would now like to introduce Laura Grove to evaluate Randy Winn's speech. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you so much, Madam General Evaluator. Fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests, and especially Randy. Thank you so much for a fabulous speech. Randy's goals with this speech, this was what to expect in a typical Toastmasters meeting. The purpose of the speech was to educate someone who is new to Toastmasters as to the various meeting roles, and to do so in a way that encourages them to take a role every meeting. Also to relate roles to their development of communications and leadership skills. And I think that you did all these things beautifully. You opened with a joke. Great way to start a speech. And what I noticed also is you wrapped up at the very end with a reference to the same joke, which is a great way to do it. because it creates bookends at the beginning and end of the speech and reminds us at the end of the point that you made at the beginning. You said not so much roles, but opportunities. That relates it to how we see our daily lives, opportunities to do all kinds of different things. I liked the way you described the agenda as a tool for conducting a meeting. I thought you included a good level of detail throughout the speech in describing each role. There's a lot of roles in a Toastmasters meeting. And in paying attention to the audience, some of us might already be familiar with these roles, and it's great to hear them described again, or the audience members might not, in which case this is a lot of information to absorb at one time. And one of the things that you did to manage that was to come up with an equivalent somewhere in life. And I particularly liked the Toastmaster as the MC or ringmaster. And what was the best was that the speaking roles might be like the mighty sequoia, but the supplemental roles were like the understory. So it was great imagery of a forest, and it was the word of the day. So you got a lot wrapped up together in there. What I think you could consider adjusting about this speech is at one point you mentioned the 12th role is this. And I thought, what were the other 11? Because I realized that either I hadn't kept track, or perhaps you hadn't identified each of them by number. But you know what? I don't think it would be necessary to do so, because one of the things that we know about speeches is the audience can usually keep track of 3 things, but not more. Well, of course, a Toastmasters meeting has more roles than that. So I think you can omit the numbering of the roles. Perhaps a way to organize them would be to do them in groups by the way we group our agenda. These roles fit in this group, these roles fit in this group, these roles fit in this group. Might be a better way to for the audience to be able to follow them. And I appreciated that you threw in a quote by Darren LaCroix, "Seize the stage." This was a fabulous speech. For me, it was a great review of all the roles in a Toastmaster speech, but it was just a stellar introduction to the Toastmasters meeting for anyone who might be new to Toastmasters. Thank you, Randy. Madam General Evaluator,